Welcome everybody to the meeting of the Area Planning Committee South and West of Tuesday the 30th of March 2021. We'll go straight to the agenda. Ian Croft, apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillors Atkinson and Shuttleworth. Thank
you. One of the things here is that, of course, should my connection go down, the Vice Chair takes over. Councillor Atkinson is the Vice Chair, so I've asked Councillor Tinsley, who is the Vice Chair of the County Planning Committee, to take over should I lose my connection. Are there any substitute members?
No, Chair, there are no substitute members today.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? Did anybody have any problems with the minutes of the 15th of January meeting?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Liz Brown, Neville's Cross. On page 10 of the papers, I'm quoted as saying paragraph 5.186 of the NPPF. It should, of course, be the County Durham Plan.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll change that. Are there any other issues arising? Can somebody shout out that they're proposing and second it?
Propose.
Second?
Second.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm now, unless somebody's going to stop me, I'm going to ask the officers present in the meeting just to introduce themselves. It'll be, I can't see all of you. If you can just sort of interrupt each other and shout out, and we'll see who we are. I can see you, Claire. Can you kick us off, please?
Certainly, Chair. Good morning. Claire Cuskin, Legal Advisor to the Committee.
Morning, Chair. Stephen Pilkington, Principal Planning Officer.
Morning, it's Mark O'Sullivan, Senior Planning Officer.
Morning, it's Dave Stewart, Highways Development Management Officer.
Thank you. Anybody else apart from Ian? We have the amazing Ian Croft, who's acting as the controller. Right, let's move to applications to be determined. 5A, units 1 to 6 Gas Lane Industrial Estate, Middleton in Teesdale. Could the case officer please give us their report on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll just load up the presentation. Give that a minute. Hopefully is that loaded up now? Can you confirm?
You can see it, yes.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, Chair. Yeah, so this is an application for the demolition of an existing tool room and warehouse and the construction of a new warehouse, including the change of use of an existing warehouse to offices and tool room. So the application site is located in the village of Middleton Teesdale. The site is edged on the plan, on that aerial image, hopefully you can make that out there, consisting of an existing industrial site operated by Technimart, who principally manufacture plastic injection molding components for medical, pharmaceutical and healthcare industry. And also the site includes an adjacent agricultural field. The site is located to the south of the centre of the village and is within the Middleton Teesdale Conservation Area. So this is a closer, clearer view, plan view of the site. You've got the highway gas lane to the east leading down to a mix of uses, including some residential properties. This provides the main access into the site. And to the west, you've got the dwellings of Newtown and Riverview. So this is an existing view of the site from Gas Lane, showing the access and a central parking area. This is a view from Gas Lane looking across the southern boundary of the site towards the residential properties of Newtown. You can just about hopefully make the properties out in the centre of the image there. This is a view from River Terrace, properties to the south, looking north to the existing southern boundary of the development. You can make out the existing buildings. You including some corrugated clad buildings, more modern buildings. This is a view from the residential dwellings of Newton towards Gas Lane provided by the objectors. The proposed development would extend across into the field beyond that, the wall in the central of the image there. This is a long distance photo from the Pennine Way showing the site. Obviously in winter, you can just about make the green field site where the arrow is located. This proposed site plan, the main element of the development is the erection of a warehouse unit towards the western boundary extending into the adjacent agricultural field. Also a new car park is proposed to the east. You can just about make on the plan a redevelopment of an existing building to provide offices. That's located centrally to the right of the image. And planting is proposed along the western and southern boundaries. This is a site layout plan in the context of the site. It shows a warehouse element edged in black, and you can see the relationship with the surrounding properties. A minimum distance of approximately 50 meters would be evident from the front elevations of Newton to the western elevation of the proposed building. Got existing and proposed elevations. The west elevation effectively shows what the resident or some residents of Newton would face onto. The development have an eaves height of 5.3 meters and a ridge height of 6.6 meters on the western elevation. This has been reduced during the course of the application. The southern elevation to the bottom of the image shows the two elements of the warehouse development a bit clearer. The smaller element would face onto Newton, and the larger element would be more central in the site with an eaves height of 6.3 meters and a ridge height of 8 meters. So we've got some existing and proposed northern elevations. This shows the proposed alterations to an existing building to facilitate office. Just wait for the next slide to load up there. My computer appears to have frozen now. I'm just going to stop the presentation and try and start it again. Appear to have some difficulty loading that at the minute, just bear with me.
Okay, Stephen. When you're trying to run applications and Teams at the same time, it stretches the processing power of a computer to its limit. Everything will be happening really slowly.
Can you confirm that's come up, Chair?
We can, you're not in, here you go, yes, it's there.
Yeah, okay. If I do it a slightly different way, so hopefully it stays with us. Okay, we've got some 3D images of the site, just trying to show the development in a bit different context. The bottom images show the proposed alterations to form the office building, and centrally to the right, that's the image, facing onto Newton. You see some landscape proposals. There are some proposals on the southern elevations which were added to the scheme, but these images haven't been updated to reflect that. So in terms of consultation responses, Middleton Teesdale Parish Council support the application. Got no objections from highways, drainage, and coastal protection, Natural England, archaeology, environmental health, and ecology. Design and conservation consider that the development would result in less than substantial harm to the character and appearance of the conservation area. And we've got landscape and the AONB partnership advise the development would be visible in some localised views from Newton and Gas Lane and elevated views from public rights of way from the north and south, resulting in some landscape harm. Got 27 letters of objection. These are detailed in the report. I'll not go through point by point. At this stage, we've got 10 letters of support received, and following the submission of amended plans, we had 15 further letters of objection. So in conclusion, the proposal involves a development of a site that is well related to the existing settlement, is compatible with adjacent land uses, and is considered appropriate in terms of scale, design, layout, and location, and to the character, function, and form of the settlement. The development would not be prejudicial to highway safety and is considered to be in a sustainable location. The development would result in less substantial harm to Middleton Teesdale Conservation Area and would result in some residual landscape harm. However, the public benefits, including the safeguarding of 92 jobs and the creation of 30 to 40 new jobs, together with the support for other local businesses, are considered to outweigh this harm. It's therefore concluded that development would accord relevant policies of the County Durham Plan and NPPF and is recommended for approval.
Thank you. Please leave that up for the moment,
Okay.
Stephen.
Sorry, I'll put it back up.
Right, my fault, sorry. Before we move on, are there any members of the committee who want to ask questions of clarification? Please indicate by putting the letters RTS, request to speak, in the chat. Is there anybody who wants to ask a question of clarification of the officer? No? Right, thank you, Stephen. I wasted your time getting you to put it back up. We'll move now to the contributions from our guests. You're so welcome. This is a vital part of the proceedings. We start by asking any town or parish councillors who are present to speak. And we do have Judith Mashita from Middleton Parish Council. You're so very welcome, Councillor Mashita. If you could keep it to 5 minutes, we would be grateful. Thank you. Please tell us what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I will say that I am not a councillor. I am clerk.
Oh,
Middleton
Speaking for the council.
Parish Council.
Well, you're still welcome.
I am pleased to have the opportunity today to address the committee on behalf of the Parish Council. This application has aroused significant interest in the local community and has somewhat polarised views into, on the one hand, those seeking to support economic development and preserve local jobs and the potential creation of new jobs, and on the other hand, those seeking to preserve the amenity of residents in close proximity to the application site. Although not stated in the officer report, the Parish Council also requested that the application be called to committee to allow all issues to be explored, given the significant scale of the development for this village and the intense interest aroused. On receipt of this planning application, the Parish Council convened an extraordinary meeting specifically to listen to views of members of the public and then to consider the application on the 8th of February 2021. The planning officer attended that meeting and was able to clarify several issues of procedure as well as specifics relating to the proposed development. At this meeting, held remotely due to pandemic restrictions on meetings in person, between 18 and 21 members of the public were in attendance, 13 of whom spoke during the extended time allocated for public participation. Middleton in Teesdale and New Begin Parish Council comprises 12 seats, 8 for the Middleton in Teesdale ward and 4 for the New Begin ward. At the time of the meeting on 8th of February, 11 of the Parish Council seats were filled and 9 of those councillors were in attendance. One councillor, as an employee of the applicant, declared an interest and left the meeting while councillors considered the application. The decision of the Parish Council, by a vote of 6-1 with 1 abstention, was to support the application. Notwithstanding that clear vote in favour of the application being supported, the Parish Council also sought to echo the concerns of residents who had made representation to councillors. Specifically, the Council asked that the possibility of lowering the height of the buildings overall be explored, that the addition of stone cladding be considered to reduce the visual impact, that light pollution and light levels in general from the site and the blocking of street lighting on Gas Lane be considered further, that the issue of noise reduction or minimisation be addressed, that the impact of traffic to and from the site and of construction traffic be carefully considered, especially during school drop-off and pick-up times. And lastly, that sufficient space was ensured for boundary tree planting and that mature or semi-mature trees be planted, not whips, to quickly create effective screening. So in conclusion, the Parish Council supports the application, but urges that conditions are attached to any permission such that the potential adverse effects on neighbouring residents might be mitigated or avoided. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. That was very clear and very helpful. I'm going to bring in the officer straight away. Have you? There were some clear requests there from the Parish Council regarding height, cladding, light, noise, traffic and boundaries. Could you wish to comment on any of those, Mr. Pilkington?
Yeah, I'll just come in quickly. So we have received amended plans during the course of the application to amend the most western part of the building, which has resulted in reduction in ridge and eave height. And I'll just sort of highlight some of the conditions that we've recommended are attached to the planning approval. Condition 6 requires a scheme of lighting to be submitted to and agreed by the local planning authority. This could cover the wider site. There's obviously landscaping indicated on the submitted plans, but Condition 7 requires the submission of a landscaping scheme, and obviously we can review that suitable specimens are planted at the appropriate time. And there is also a construction management plan that has been agreed with our environmental health colleagues and Highways Authority that we're happy with, that would help mitigate construction impacts. And the Highways Authority also offer no objection to the application in the round.
I'll bring in Mr. Stewart in a moment. Talk to me about boundaries, Mr. Pilkington. What they're asking is for that we have mature trees put in, not whips. Is there anything about that in the landscape management plan or anything? How is that being dealt with?
Yes, so there is a comprehensive condition that they need to give us the landscaping details, and as part of that we can ensure that suitable size specimens are planted at the appropriate time on the advice of our landscape officers to ensure that they mature at a reasonable rate there.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stewart, have you anything to add about highways and traffic?
I think the paragraph 154 in members' committee report summarises it quite well. It's an expansion of an existing industrial facility. The constraints of Gas Lane are known, in which terms other places it serves, but the amount of traffic is relatively modest, additional, and in that context, it can't really be seen as one that would sustain a refusal. The construction management plan, the content of it is essentially is quite specific in terms of it's fully acknowledges the fact that there is a school on Gas Lane, and as much as possible tries to mitigate in terms of the likely arrival of construction traffic to offset and deviate away from peak periods of the school. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Now I'm delighted to welcome Judith Tarn, who is an objector. Are you there, Judith? You're muted at the moment.
I am. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. God bless you. Thank you. Now you have 5 minutes to tell us all your objections. And if you go as long as 4 minutes, then Mr. Croft will interrupt you and just shout that you've got a minute left. Sometimes, even with experienced speakers, this throws them a bit. Don't be thrown and sort of spoil the last minute of your talk. Just start again at the sentence and off you go. We're delighted to hear your submission, Judith. Please start.
Okay, thank you. Chairman and members of the Planning Committee. Oh, right. Chairman and members of the Planning Committee. Thank you for letting me speak at your meeting. I represent residents of Middleton Teesdale who are very concerned about this planning application. Many of our concerns are about how the proposed development will affect our lives and property. All of these have been listed in the Planning Officer's report under public responses items 66 and 68. So I will still stand, and despite some suggested mitigation in the report, we still remain very concerned. We are grateful to Councillor Richard Bell for recognising our concerns about the scale of the proposed development and calling this application integration. As we learned more about the proposed development, we read in the Teesdale Mercury that Technimark's owners, who are American, only moved the company to Middleton in 2016, and that was from a source from their Technimark Incorporation, 7th of April 2016. And they made a thinly veiled threat that if they didn't receive permission to expand, they would take the factory elsewhere, leading to loss of jobs for our friends and neighbours in the village. This caused consternation and division amongst our close-knit community. Technimark further claimed that there wasn't suitable development land within 30 miles of Middleton. This land depends on the Durham County Plan, despite employment land allocation sites at both Shawbank and Harmire Industrial Estates in Barnard Castle, a mere 10 miles away and situated on much better served bus routes. DCC's Steve Pilkington confirmed at the public consultation meeting that DCC has a bespoke business team that works with companies to suitably accommodate them using these sites. However, there's no indication in the report that policy 11F of the DCP, and that states, couldn't be more appropriately situated on an existing or allocated industrial estate, an existing suitable building or other land within settlements in the vicinity, that's being considered. This finding that relocation will both save current jobs and provide opportunities for the estimated 6 possible new positions per annum as a result of the expansion. Good relationships with local businesses could also continue, though interestingly, there have been no letters of support from these local businesses, nor from the school. The report clearly sets out DCC's obligations under the NPPF and the resulting DCP. Policy 39 of the DCP
Judith Town, we seem to have lost you. Please just pause your presentation if you can hear me. Claire, am I the only person who has lost this, or has everybody lost her?
Chair, I was experiencing difficulties as well.
Judith Tarn, you were breaking up most of the time, and now you've gone silent altogether. This sometimes happens. Ian, could you perhaps attempt to contact Judith Tarn in another way? And if she can email you a copy of that, you can finish off reading it for her.
Chair, what I would suggest is that Judith disconnects from the meeting and then tries to reconnect, and I'll admit her again from the lobby to save the connections a better one.
Any better? I'm very happy to do that. Unfortunately, we can't see whether Judith can hear us at all to actually do that. Do you have her telephone number, Ian?
Chair, I'm just looking for it now.
We'll just take a short break. If we can do this quickly, I would rather do things properly and in the correct order than sort of change things. But Claire, can you advise me if we do have significant problems reconnecting with Ms. Tarn? What would you advise us to do in the circumstances?
Chair, the remote attendance by members of the public set out in the Constitution provides that you have 3 options if there's difficulties with members of the public. You can either adjourn for a short while, which we're doing at the moment to try and enable the person to come back in, or suspend consideration of the item of business until such time as they can come back in, i.e. move on to the next item of agenda, or continue if it's not practicable in the absence of that member of public. If there's going to be significant connection problems and we can't get hold of Judith Tarn.
Chair, sorry to interrupt, but just to let you know, I haven't actually got a telephone number for Judith. I've only got an email address.
Right, well, can you email her? Ask her to email the her little talk to you, and then you can read it out. Try and make communication in that way. Right, okay, I'm not going to... now, Judith Tarn is waiting in the lobby. As fast as I come to one conclusion, the events keep up on me. Are we going to admit Ian?
I'm admitting her now, Chair. She's back in the meeting, Chair.
Can you hear us, Judith Tarn? Can you hear us?
Hello. Yeah.
Hello. Can I suggest that you turn off your camera?
Hello. Just going to email you, Judith. Right. Okay. You haven't got a number, and I can't get it out your head. So yeah. Anyway. Yeah. Right. Can you hear me?
No, the answer is that we can't hear you. Judith
Can you hear?
No, we can't hear you. I'm sorry. Judith Mashita, I take it that was you. Was that you phoning Judith there?
No, Chair, it wasn't.
but the person who can hear what's happening and who is phoning Judith, can you ask Judith to email a copy of her presentation to Ian Croft? What I'm going to do here now is I'm going to stop this and I'm going to make a suggestion to the committee. And if Judith emails her talk to Ian, then he can read it out on her behalf. Thank you very much indeed. Claire, I need your advice here. What I'm going to suggest we do is that we plough on for the moment, take the applicant out of order, in the hope that then we'll be able to read the rest of Judith's submission and then move on with this application.
Chair, that's fine. Do we also on this one have a representation from Richard Bell, or is that on a subsequent application?
Yes, Chair, we have a representation from Councillors Bell and Henderson for this one.
Well, in that case, what we'll do now is, I should have taken those before the objector anyway. Let's listen to the Councillor Bell's submission. Ian, can you read that out to us, please?
Yes, Chair, this is a submission made by Councillor Bell on behalf of himself and Councillor Henderson, and it goes as follows. The building of industrial units in the field next to them is understandably an undesirable development from the perspective of the residents of Newton and River Terrace. On the other hand, Technomark are a major local employer providing quality technical jobs at a time when GSK are laying off. Technomark have reduced the height of a building in response to a suggestion made by myself during an open public virtual meeting. The question seems to be, at what point does the loss of a view have such a severe visual impact on a private property such that it may affect the residential amenity of a dwelling? That is a matter of judgment for committee, but we would support the residents' request for a deferment to enable a site visit by councillors, as it is hard to judge this from photographs and drawings alone.
Thank you. Right. What I'm going to do now, again, please, can members of the committee shout if you think I'm messing this up at all. I'm now going to ask the applicant, Stephen Shaw, to speak to us. Are you present in the meeting, Stephen?
Hi, good morning, John. Yes, I'm here.
Thank you very much. Same to you as the applicant as to the objector. You have 5 minutes. Ian will shout after 4 minutes, and don't allow that to spoil your moment. We're listening to you now. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity this morning to speak. Yeah, my name is Stephen Shaw. I'm the Managing Director for Technomark UK. We are an American-owned business. We manufacture plastic injection molded components for the medical, pharmaceutical and healthcare industry. In 2020, our business was deemed essential due to the components we manufacture being directly used in the treatment of COVID patients. Our facility remained open 24/7 through the whole of the COVID pandemic, and more recently, some of the products we manufacture have been identified in the manufacture of the COVID-19 vaccine. We've been operating out the current site in Middleton and Teesdale for over 25 years. We provide full-time permanent employment for over 90 people, many of whom have worked with the business for many years. Of those 90 plus people, 75% of the people live within a 15-mile radius of the site, and including 30% who live within 1 mile of the site. Technomark helps support local economy through our business interactions with local shops, pubs, hotels and many other trades. Technomark and its staff have a proud history of supporting the local community and every year fundraise and donate thousands to local good causes. Over the years, Technomark have invested heavily in all areas of the business, including staff training, energy efficient equipment, and in our facilities to help maximise utilisation of space. Our business has grown double digits for the last several years and is now out of space, and this expansion is urgently required to cater for further growth over the next 5 to 10 years. Our owners have committed to invest in this year 1.3 million in this expansion, work which will be carried out by local businesses employing local people. We also expect a further £1 million worth of investment in the preceding 12 to 18 months in new equipment and infrastructure. This planned growth will bring up with it employment opportunities, as we expect to add at least 30 to 40 new heads in the next 5 years. Jobs ranging from operating staff to highly skilled trained engineers, and including the growth of our youth training apprenticeship scheme. Technimark have worked closely with local council members for many years to find solutions to our growing needs, including extensive reviews of the Harmeyer site mentioned previously. Unfortunately, as good as an opportunity that wasn't one that was a viable solution for the business. We'd also identified a brownfield site, 1 hour drive from the current location. This opportunity is put on hold due to Brexit at the time. But since then, as the business has continued to grow, this opportunity would no longer be viable given the lead time of the project development. Expansion at our current operation remains the best and most viable opportunity to keep the business local. Without our ability to grow at the current site, there is a possibility and a risk that the business would need to relocate to find a larger location outside of the Dales. Technimark respectfully requests that members of the committee look to support this application to help support secure employment and future employment at the site. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for that very clear applicant statement. Right, Ian, have we got somebody is not on mute? Can that person just check and put themselves on mute? Ian, have we got the statement from Judith Tarn?
Chair, no, I sent her an email at 10 o'clock this morning, but she hasn't sent anything back to me yet.
Right then. Claire, can you advise on this? I would intend, therefore, to pause consideration this case and move on to the next case, and to give Judith Tarn time to get her presentation to Ian Croft.
Certainly, Chair, that's permitted pursuant to the Constitution.
I'm very sorry to everybody who's watching and interested in the Gas Lane Industrial Estate application, and it will make it necessary. It disrupts, doesn't it? So I apologise to everybody, but I think it's absolutely vital that the objectors too are clearly allowed to have their say within the process. Nevertheless, while we wait, I intend now, with everybody's permission, please, to move on to agenda item 5B, land south of Chiltern Telephone Exchange, Durham Road. And can we please have the case officers on this?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just loading it up for you.
Thank you. Ian, you are able to see who's not on mute and to mute them. Can you do so, please?
Yes, Chair, I've just muted them.
Thank you.
Okay, can everybody see that screen? So the second item, thank you. The second item, we have the planning application for one dwelling with associated access and tree works on land to the south of the Chiltern Telephone Exchange building on Durham Road, Chiltern. 2 seconds. Here we have the application site edged in red. We have 2 seconds. There you go. Application site edged red. It's located within residential surrounds with neighbouring residential property to the north, east, south and west. Durham Road bypasses the site to the west there. And we have the telephone exchange building just to the north. The site has 2 key characteristics there. So the green area is a woodland buffer area, and the white area in the middle is a managed grassland, as this aerial photograph shows. Okay, there's a few photos of the site here. Looking east into the site from Durham Road, this is the location of the proposed access. You can see the telephone exchange building just through the trees there to the left, properties on Meadowdale just to the rear there. beyond the site. We have the application site stood within the actual site there, showing the unmanaged grassland, and the trees to the south there is part of that buffer, and Meadowdale to the left there. And this is again stood within the site looking west towards Durham Road. You can see the trees there in the distance, and that is again the location of the proposed access. And this is just a couple of shots of the telephone exchange building, which sits to the north of the site. Proposed site plan. So it's the erection of one detached dwelling within the centre of the site there. We have a private garden to the east and access from Durham Road to the west with a private driveway. Importantly shown on here are the blue dots, so the location of the trees on the site. These are all covered by a TPO. The blue dots with the green circles around them, they are the canopies, they are the trees to be retained. The blue dots without the green canopy, they are the trees to be removed. And I can come back to this later, especially this slide. It's a proposed planting plan submitted by the applicant. Again, it shows the areas of the trees to be retained of the TPO. It shows obviously where the trees are going to be coming out, and importantly, replacement planting to the south of the site there to mitigate any tree removal. Proposed elevations, it's a two-storey dwelling with a single-storey attachment to the south. And we have the proposed floor plans. Site sections, what I want to show on this plan is literally that the dwelling will be sunk into the ground partially to reduce its impact. And by doing this, you can see that in relation to numbers 30, 31 and 32 Meadowdale to the east, the ridge line is pretty much the same. So again, there will be no sort of overbearing impact. Sunlight study, I'll definitely come back to this one again later if asked, but what we're trying to show here is that through the day, the proposed dwelling will not cause overshadowing on properties to the east. And I'll explain that if needed. So in terms of consultation responses, the applications reported to the Planning Committee at the request of Councillor Potts, who expresses concerns over the number of trees to be removed, also the suitability of the site in question, which would have a negative biodiversity impact. We've received a late representation from Chiltern Town Council, who raise objections to the proposals on the grounds of impact on trees, wildlife and ecology. We've got 3 letters of objection from local residents with a summary of the concerns raised set out within the officer's report. In terms of internal consultees, we've had no objections from highways, policy, environmental health, contaminated land, drainage, and importantly, landscape, arb and ecology. All raised no objections to the proposal subject to conditions suggested. The applications to be determined in accordance with relevant policies set out within the County Durham Plan and paragraph 11C of the NPPF, which requires applications which accord with an up-to-date development plan to be approved without delay. This is a sustainable and an accessible location within the existing settlement framework. Consideration is given to the scale and design of the works, privacy amenity implications, landscape, arb impact, ecology, highways and contamination, with no objections raised. Consideration is also given to all neighbouring objections and the Town Council objections as detailed within the officer's report. The application would satisfy the provisions of the County Durham Plan and the NPPF, and it is recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thanks, Chair.
If you can leave that out, leave it.
I'll put it straight back up, don't worry.
Are there any members who have questions to ask of clarification? Please indicate by typing RTS. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Liz Brown, Councillor for Neville's Cross. Really, it's about the TPO. I understand it's a temporary TPO. Would it be turned into a permanent TPO? Do you know?
Thanks, Chair. I'll answer that. Yeah. So basically, there is a TPO on the site. The original TPO went on the site back after the first application was withdrawn for this site. It is temporary in that it's going to be reassessed in August of this year. That's the process we follow with TPOs. And obviously we will reassess it in August to see if it is worth keeping on there or not. But importantly, for now, there is a TPO on the site, yes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of clarification? I haven't received any, so I feel able to move on now. I'm going to take Councillor Christine Potts. If we can lose the, thank you. Councillor Potts, if you would like to speak to us, please, that would be smashing.
All right, thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing this item to be brought to the committee today. As the local member and also a resident of Meadowdale, I wish to outline my concerns and objections to this planning application. I have communicated with the residents of Meadowdale, whose properties will be adversely impacted by the erection of this proposed development, and I completely understand and share their views. This particular application is on a site which isn't allocated for housing within Policy 4 of the County Durham Plan, and should only be considered if it meets the criteria determined against Policy 6 of the plan. Part C does state that it should not result in the loss of open land that has ecological value, and I truly believe that this site has such value. This is a long-established area of woodland comprising of 72 mature trees. It's a haven for our local wildlife. We have a huge variety of our native birds. These include owls, woodpeckers, and our more common nesting birds. The site also attracts foxes, squirrels, hedgehogs, and especially bats, as well as providing a carpet for a variety of wildflowers and ferns. It needs to be noted that many of these trees are subject to a second temporary tree preservation order, which it's hoped will become permanent in due course. I have no doubt whatsoever that the felling of 40 of these 72 trees, plus the removal of hedgerows outlined in the application, will absolutely decimate the biodiversity of this unique part of Chiltern. The copse of woodland also provides a much needed landscape buffer from the noise of the adjacent busy road, as well as tackling the carbon emissions, air pollution, and assisting with the natural drainage of the land. Durham County Council are passionately committed to the climate change agenda and are proactively planting vast quantities of trees to assist with this initiative. Therefore, to me, it seems very contradictory to approve the loss of 40 trees to justify the erection of one dwelling. Over the past few years, as members will know, Chiltern has seen an unprecedented growth of housing on our greenfield sites to the south, to the west, and to the north of the town, and there's even more significant development currently going through the planning stages. I believe that Chiltern's done more than its fair share to contribute to the county's target of new housing. Finally, Chair and members, I really feel so passionate about protecting long-established areas of our natural habitat, such as this site gives, and it's always been a much welcome, much valued integral part of our community, and which we also would be absolutely devastated to lose. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Potts, for that very clear submission. Mark, I'm not going to come to you immediately, but I noticed that it wasn't in the SHLA, the ecological damage that would be done, particularly the felling of 40 out of 72 trees, its value as a noise buffer, and also the fact that there's been an awful lot of other building of houses going on, suggesting that this extra house isn't needed. However, before I come to you, Mark, I'm going to take the other two objectors. Now we've got Philip or Louise Keenan and William Porter. You're down on my list as having 2.5 minutes each. Is this what you have agreed to? Are you happy with this?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
That's so smashing. Thank you. Well, what we'll do then, please, is I'll ask Philip or Louise Keenan to speak first. What will happen is after 2 minutes, Ian Croft will interrupt you to tell you have 30 seconds left. As always, don't be thrown by that. Just gather yourself together and carry on for another half minute, and and then I'll take you, Mr. Porter, if that's okay. Is it Philip or Louise who's going to be speaking to us?
Philip, Chair.
Hiya. You're very quiet, Philip. Just make sure you don't go. You speak to the microphone. Please let us know what you have to say.
Right. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to listen to our concerns. We believe your decision will ultimately be based upon the environmental impact and the value you yourselves place upon the woodland trees within this copse, the extensive habitat it supports, and the devastation it will cause on its removal. Mark O'Sullivan's report states as a county we have more than enough deliverable housing land, and Councillor Potts can confirm we have exceeded the quota for new housing in the town of Chiltern. The report also refers to the arboricultural impact assessment, which was paid for by the developer. However, there is no mention of the points raised in relation to the tree protection orders placed by fellow colleagues at Durham County Council. It should be further noted that Mark O'Sullivan's report mentions 11 times the importance of environmental issues and that these should be taken into consideration. If we recap, the site has 72 trees and 40 are to be removed. I was speaking to someone who digs holes for a living, and I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, there is no way this development can be built without damaging the few remaining trees, regardless of the methods they refer to in the arboricultural impact assessment, which granted all sounds plausible on paper, but the trouble is you don't dig holes out around trees on paper. 2 weeks ago in the Northern Echo, there was an article headlining "Planting Trees to Fight Climate Emergency." This outlined the proposals and measures to plant tree cover in County Durham in relation to the Climate Emergency Response Plan. If this bill is passed, this will make a mockery of the Durham County Council policy, but of equal concern is the fact that this will set a precedence for any developer who wishes to remove trees for development, in effect giving them
30 seconds remaining.
40 trees head start, even if the trees are protected. This development has no gain or benefit to anything or anyone else other than the developer. We understand that council elections are coming up soon, and whichever party you belong to, you'll all have your own environmental policies. And this is a great platform for encouraging the younger generation to get involved in politics, as they are very passionate about the environment. We've all seen councillors in the media planting trees and bushes over the years, so let me ask you this. If you're prepared to participate...
The time has elapsed, Chair.
...planting new trees, will you all have the same enthusiasm to have your photograph taken with the 40 cut-down tree stumps under a suggested headline, Climate Emergency Response Plan? And on that note, I wish to thank you all a good day and thank you for your time.
I'm talking to mute. I'm saying thank you very much indeed. Mark, what I heard was damage to roots, loss of trees, but also the questioning the planning gain on this as part of that balancing act. There's benefit only to the developer and minimising the benefit of this application. Mr. Porter, you have 2.5 minutes and you'll be asked to stop. After you'll be warned after 2 minutes. If I could ask you, please, to be to stop when asked, please. It makes it not fair to other people when people take more than their allotted time. Mr. Porter.
Yes, Chair. Thank you. Can you see me?
We can see you and hear you, sir.
Okay, good. Thank you for your offer of being able to speak to everybody. My name is Barry Porter, and first I want to suggest that the proposed development's size would be oppressive to the properties in Meadowdale. The amount of sunlight apparently is going to be explained if necessary. The screening out of the sunlight and the oppressive size of the building could have adverse effects on some residents to the east of this proposed development. And I would say here that the report also mentions light level measurements, which were done in the summertime, and they don't reflect autumnal or winter sunlight levels due to the lower elevation of the sun. Now, given the number of trees proposed to be removed to make space for the development, I feel that these impacts would not be within acceptable limits. In the ecology section, no mention is made of invertebrates, bats, or breeding mammals. And the fact also that the wall distances are reduced suggests that the proposed house design is too large for the plot, and this fact requires other compromises, such as extra tree removal, to be considered. I'm aware that the stairwell is not a habitable room on this house if built. It should be obscured if it is built, because it's the only way that people can feel as if they're not being overlooked, because the houses, the only point that can be overlooked from that window is directly into habitable rooms of the houses opposite. Now, this group of trees is, as has been said, a very scarce resource in Chiltern, and any reduction or modification of it would be a great loss to the town. The local wildlife, insects and other invertebrates, bats, mice, voles and the birds, hedgehogs, foxes, and so on, they're all attracted to such areas. 30 seconds? For a variety of reasons, they're attracted there, and they rely on the endemic flora and related fauna and for their survival. I'll just skip to the final statement and say allowing this proposal to be passed would create a precedent for the county, allowing for the removal of trees on other sites which should be protected from unnecessary development, including in areas where housing quotas have already been fulfilled. Sorry for my hesitations, but thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Sir, that was excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Mark, I'm going to ask you to come in now and reply to the points raised by the objectors. From Mr. Parker, I had the sunlight issue, particularly the point that the sun will be lower in the winter. There was a clear statement that he felt the ecology statement in the application to be weak and to be insufficient. There was a comment about the size of the house in relation to the size of the plot. There was a suggestion that there will be overlooking, and both he and the previous objector talked about precedent. And I'll deal with that. There's no precedent. Sort of each planning application is taken in itself, and you will not be setting a precedent for the future, one way or the other here. But Mark, do you want to deal with some of the issues, please, that have been raised by the objectors?
Yes, Chair, that's fine. What I'll do, can I just put the presentation back up, because there's a few slides I want to refer to, that's all. Okay, I'll try and do it in turn. So there was a number of points here. I'll start with the ecology. There was a lot made of the ecology, which fair play. Okay, so the site is currently trees and unmanaged grassland. As part of the application, as part of all applications like this, we consult our in-house ecology team. They've viewed the site, they've viewed the application, they've viewed all supporting documentation, they've seen all neighbour town council objections, and they've raised no objections throughout the application. These are the views of qualified professionals who've taken on board all the information presented to them in reports, professional reports, and we need to take that into account. If our in-house ecologists are raising no objections subject to a breeding birds informative, then that is the route that planning officers will follow. They haven't suggested any conditions. They've suggested the trees to be removed don't have any value in terms of species living within them. It's not to say that there may be animals in the ground sort of using the area, but from our ecologist point of view, there is no ecological objection. In terms of the footprint of the building that was touched on, Okay, so the building is, well, the proposed scheme is a revision of a previously withdrawn application. So the withdrawn application that came in last year was much larger, and this is a compromise. It's accepted that the footprint of the proposed dwelling is larger than properties to the east. I'll just get the slide up. There you go. It's accepted that it's larger than properties on Meadowdale to the east, but it's important to remember that this property will be viewed from Durham Road. As you're travelling down Durham Road, you will see properties of similar and even larger footprint to the northwest, the west and the southwest. And it is in these properties that the proposed dwelling will be viewed in the context of. Also behind a row of trees, which is to be retained, and new planting. Which brings me on to the issue of the trees. Again, yes, there is a TPO on the site. Yes, this plan does show it's a group TPO. This plan does show all the trees to be retained, the canopies, and the ARB impact assessment, which was referred to, was written again by a qualified professional who knows how to calculate root protection areas. The dwelling has been positioned to avoid the root protection areas of the trees to be retained. So the trees that are coming out because they need to come out. The trees that are staying there will be protected, and there are conditions on the suggested approval ensuring that the protective measures are in place throughout the course of the development. I just want to explain that the TPO was first imposed on the site in the interests of ensuring future control over the retention of the trees during the application process. The presence of a TPO does not mean you cannot develop the site. So here, the most suitable trees would be retained, as shown on that plan, and the removal of those less suitable within the wider group would promote the future growth of the retained species, thereby improving the integrity of the wider tree group value as a whole. The proposed new planting, as detailed on submitted plans, which this plan shows, and you can see the tree planting to the south, would mitigate the loss of the trees to be removed. So whilst there are a number of trees to be removed, we're actually gaining some, and that cannot be seen as a massive negative biodiversity impact. We're actually offsetting that in this occasion. It's important to note that despite all this, landscape and ARB officers do not object to the application. And therefore, if you question what is the point of the TPO, again, the TPO was applied in the interests of ensuring future control over the retention of the trees during the application process. To this extent, the TPO has been successful and it will be reassessed. In terms of overshadowing, I'll try to explain it in two ways. Firstly, we've got the east-facing elevation there, which is on the top row. You'll see two windows. They will both serve bathrooms and they will both look towards properties on Meadowdale. They will be obscured by condition. We have a long, narrow window in the middle, which is a stairwell. None of these windows are classed as habitable windows. So we have a residential amenity standards SPD, which the application's been assessed with. This specifically mentions a 21 metres distance between main facing elevations containing windows serving a habitable room. Again, these windows are not habitable, so therefore we could not apply the standards on this occasion. In terms of the overshadowing, I'll direct attention to this plan. What this plan basically shows is throughout the day, different time periods, with the dwelling in place, the level of shadowing which will result. We have properties on Meadowdale to the east. As the sun rises in the east, sets in the west, there'll be no overshadowing caused by the proposed development before midday, because Meadowdale are overshadowing themselves. It's only after midday, so if you look at, say, 1 o'clock through to 6:30, you see the shadow to the north of the proposed dwelling creep around to the east. But what you will also notice is that the level of overshadowing of the rear garden of properties on Meadowdale is already caused by the boundary fence. The actual proposed property is not causing the overshadowing of properties on Meadowdale to the east. I'm trying to think in terms of the Schlar that was mentioned. No, it's not within the Schlar. It's a very small site that won't be assessed within the Schlar. But that does not mean that the site cannot be developed. The application is an unallocated site, so therefore policy 6 of the County Durham Plan applies. We have considered the application against all the merits of policy 6, and it is an acceptable site. When we add that to paragraph 11C of the NPPF, applications which record of an up-to-date plan should be approved without delay. I think that is it, Chair. I'll bring
Thank you very much for those clear statements. I'm now going to ask the agent of the applicant to speak. Mr. Longstaff, are you with us?
I am, Chair. Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed. You have 5 minutes and you'll be warned after 4. Even professionals, Mr. Longstaff, sometimes get thrown by Ian Croft's booming voice. So just be ready for it. You'll be warned after 4 minutes.
I'll keep it concise.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Chairman and members. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Stephen Longstaff and I'm a director at ELG Planning, acting on behalf of the applicant, alongside Matthew Lee from Clasper Lee Design. We would firstly like to fully endorse the officer's recommendation to grant full planning permission for a single dwelling on this site. We have worked positively with officers throughout the pre-application and planning application process in order to achieve an acceptable design that addresses all technical matters. As set out in the committee report, officers are satisfied that the proposals have addressed all the issues raised in the previously withdrawn application, as well as comments during the course of the application. The application is recommended for approval on this basis. You have in front of you a scheme for a high quality dwelling on an infill site which officers confirm is a sustainable and accessible location surrounded by existing residential development. The proposals are therefore acceptable in principle in line with policy 6 of the County Durham Plan. The objections relating to tree loss, impacts upon biodiversity and amenity from local residents are noted. However, we have comprehensively addressed these points in our submission, as have officers in the report in front of you. The detailed landscaping scheme demonstrates that new planting will mitigate the loss of the trees to be removed, which are young and of limited value. The scale and massing of the proposed dwelling has been significantly reduced since the previously withdrawn application, and the building will be set down below the existing ground level within the plot. Furthermore, the windows to the rear of the proposed dwelling at first floor level serve bathrooms and a staircase, and as such, and as you've already heard, are not habitable rooms. Moreover, the bathroom windows will be obscure glazed. As a result of careful design, the proposals will not give rise to any loss of privacy or amenity issues to neighbouring residents, in accordance with the requirements of the County Durham Plan and the Residential Design SPD. There are no amenity, arboricultural, landscape, ecology or technical objections to the proposals from any of the statutory consultees or the Council's own professional officers, as noted in the committee report and by the planning officer so far. As such, we would respectfully ask you to endorse your officer's recommendation and grant full planning approval. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Longstaff. Now it says here that Matthew Lee, the applicant, is available to answer questions. Is Mr. Lee here, please?
I am, yes, Chair.
Smashing. If you, Mr. Longstaff, the committee may have no questions for you, but I'm going to give that opportunity to the committee. Is there any member of the committee who wants to ask a question of the applicant or their agent? I'm not getting anybody, rather frighteningly. I have a question. Can sort of, in terms of insulation, emissions, climate issues like that, can you tell me sort of about the quality of the house that you're building, sort of how it meets the building for light standards and things like that? Basically, I'm asking you, say it was a high quality building. I'm asking you to elucidate on that fact, particularly with reference to emissions and insulation and that kind of thing.
Yeah, as the obviously I'm an agent, I'm not the applicant chair, but I'm the architectural designer of the project. I have experience of building highly airtight, highly insulated buildings, which reduce the amount of energy which are needed to heat the property. It is looking at the potential of using SIPS panels or timber frame, which have high levels of insulation and tightness to sort of create sort of very efficient dwelling. And we'll also be looking at the use of renewable technologies, potentially air source heat pump, mechanical ventilation with heat recovery, and potentially solar PV panels. Those are sort of details to be discussed in the technical design of the building.
That's Councillor Richardson, you had a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's probably a silly question, but if the building is being planned to be put into the ground a little bit, is there any chance of, in the future or currently, water egress getting into the foundations or anything like that?
No, there would be no water in. The building obviously has been set partially into the ground. The site is slope and it's been sort of taken from a lower point. There is sort of a small retaining wall. Obviously, all surface water details are going to be, as you can see in the officer's recommendation, there's a condition for surface water to be mitigated, and that'll be obviously details submitted to the council's authority to be approved, which will be satisfactory to them going forward.
Councillor Brown, did you have a question there?
I did, Chair. Thank you very much indeed. A couple of things. The first of all, I noticed that 3 of the objectors mentioned bats, and yet there hasn't been a bat survey, and I wondered why. And the second thing I wanted to ask Mark is when the sunlight survey, the date of the sunlight survey, please. Thank you.
No problem. In terms of the bats, so as a matter of course, when we consult our ecologists, they assess the site in terms of their knowledge and the skills of, does the site have bats? They haven't raised the issue of bats on the site. They've concluded that the trees to be removed aren't capable of supporting bats. It doesn't mean there may not be bats flying around the area, but that site does not contain bats, so they will not have asked for a bat survey in that sense. In terms of the sunlight assessment, that was taken 21st of March. So around now, yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. I have no more councillors wanting to ask questions. Thank you, Mr. Longstaff, and thank you, Mr. Lee. I'm getting everybody's designations completely wrong this morning. Sorry, I thought you were the applicant.
Thanks.
Right, members of the committee, over to you now for discussion proposals, and we'll move to a decision on this. Members of the committee, would you like to speak? If you can indicate by putting RTS. Ian, I'm not seeing any response. Is there an issue here?
No, Chair. There are no RTS requests in the meeting chat. Oh, there's one just come
Got
through.
one at last. Who is this, please?
It's Councillor Richardson, Chair.
Councillor Richardson again. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, if that's twice in a row.
No. I was getting panicky there, George.
Yeah, that's why I thought I would just have a word. Once again, as planning committee members, it's up to us to decide on a difficult application. I'm pleased Liz Brown brought up the mention of bats, because they have been mentioned and they consistently get mentioned. However, they are a shy creature, and I would be amazed if there were any bats other than was said just flying around passing that wouldn't be living there. I understand the local person's feeling, but I don't think there's anything that we could really stop this application progressing. So I'll listen to other members' opinions before offering anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. I've been relying on you substantially recently. Councillor Jewell.
Yeah, I have some concerns here that what local people seem to be saying is there is a significant amount of wildlife in general in this area, and yet the report doesn't identify, or the various sort of reports that have been carried out don't seem to identify this. So I would like to know whether factually there is the degree of wildlife using the site which is suggested, or whether this is not quite accurate. The other thing that I noticed from the plan is that what we've got here is an infill site where it is you know, there's quite a lot of houses around it. It isn't on the fringe of the countryside. And the third thing that I'd like clarification on, we talked about putting additional trees in. We know how many trees we are taking out, but have we got a firm number of trees that are going in? Thank you.
Mark?
Thanks, Chair. In terms of, Councillor Jewell was spot on there in terms of saying it's an infill site. It is surrounded by houses. It's not to say that therefore there will be absolutely no ecology value. But when ecologists look at the application, when we first consult on them, they do screen the application to see if they would require an ecology survey. On this occasion, they have not requested an ecology survey. That is the reason there isn't one with the application. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's incorrect, or it's just that they do not feel the site requires an ecology survey. In terms of the number of trees to come out, it's all set out in the ARB statement. I haven't got the precise number of trees that are going in, but I was just looking at that plan. Maybe the applicant may know off the top of their head. I don't want to sort of throw them under the bus. I don't know the exact number going in, but there is obviously mitigation going in to offset the loss. Sorry about that.
Thanks very much, Mark.
No problem.
Okay, it's quite clear here that this is a site which is deeply valued by the local community for its greenness, for its ecological, what they see is its ecological value. The problem for the committee is that that is just not supported in the arboricultural and the ecological reports, as Councillor Jewell has indicated. We need to move to a decision now, people, and I'm sorry, but I need members of the committee to come in. I need your comments about how you would resolve this conflict, and I need a proposal so we can move to a decision. Members of the committee, it really is now down to you to speak up, please. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Interested to hear, particularly from Christine Potts, about the wildlife of Chiltern. However, having listened to the application in full, I can only move the officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you. Thank you,
Councillor Richardson. Councillor Jewell.
Yes, always a very difficult situation, controversial, as are many of our planning decisions. But what I feel that I have to go by is I have to go by sort of what the planning legislation is. One of the most important things for me is to look at planning legislation, and if the application conforms with the relevant rules, then I feel that we don't have much choice but to go along with the recommendations of the planning officer on this one. I realise it's a difficult one and the local residents won't be happy about this, but the reality is that I don't think that we could defend a refusal decision on this application. Therefore, I will second Councillor Richardson's proposal.
Thank you very much. I have a proposal and a seconder and an entire committee who are unwilling to speak. I'm going to ask Claire to take the vote now, please.
Thanks, Chair. So I'll take the vote in alphabetical order in respect of members present. So it's the proposal which has been seconded to approve the application as set out within the report. Councillor Bell, are you for or against, please?
For the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, are you for or against?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jewell?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Maitland?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Quinn?
For the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson?
For.
Councillor Tinsley?
For the application.
And Councillor Zay, please.
For.
Thank you. Chair, unless you wish to vote, that's unanimously in favour.
Thank you very much. Therefore, the committee has approved the recommendation. Now, I'm going to make a comment before we move on. I cannot understand the situation in many of these applications where what we're doing is we're putting a residence into a green area, and yet ecology and arboriculture come back and say that there is no damage to the environment. I sympathise dreadfully with the residents here, particularly with the resident who says you cannot put down foundations without damaging roots. But to the objectors, Councillor Jewell is absolutely correct. We have to go on the evidence before us, and we have to accept the expert evidence, or that will be challenged at appeal, and and it will be judged to have been an unsafe decision. So whilst I personally sympathise with you, the decision of the committee is final. Thank you very much for your attendance. I'm now going to move back because we have the statement from Judith Tarn. I'm going to ask members of the committee to refresh their memory about the gas lane application. We heard, if you remember, a very clear exposition from Mr. Pilkington. Judith Mashiter, on behalf of the Parish Council, reiterated their reservations that you've read in your report, and these were answered by the officer, addressed in the conditions. We heard a statement for the application, which recommended the firm. It said they wanted 5 to 10 years growth expansion, and that they'd looked at other sites by Mr. Stephen Shaw, but we were unable to hear what Judith Tarn for the objectors was saying because of connection problems. I'm now going to ask Ian Croft to read out that statement that Judith Tarn would have made.
Thank you, Chair. I propose to start from the beginning because I think Judith's connection was poor.
Absolutely.
All the way through her. Okay. So Judith's representation is thus. Chairman and members of the Planning Committee, thank you for letting me speak at your meeting. I represent the residents of Middleton and Teesdale who are very concerned about this planning application. Initially, as you would expect, many of our concerns were about how the proposed development would affect our lives and property. All of these have been listed in the Planning Officer's report under public responses, items 66 and 68, so I won't repeat them here. But they still stand, and despite some suggested mitigation in the report, we still remain very concerned. We are therefore grateful to Councillor Bell for recognising our concerns about the scale of the proposed development and calling this application to committee for consideration. As we learn more about the proposed development, we read in the Teesdale Mercury that Technomark's American owners, who only moved the company to Middleton in 2016, had made a thinly veiled threat that if they didn't receive permission to expand, they would take the factory elsewhere, leading to loss of jobs for our friends and neighbours in the village. This caused both consternation and division amongst our close-knit community. Technomark further claimed that there wasn't suitable development land within 30 miles of Middleton. This we found disingenuous because we know that the Durham County Plan describes employment land allocation sites at both Shawbank and Harmire Industrial Estates in Barnet Castle, a mere 10 miles away and situated on much better served bus routes. Durham County Council Steve Pilkington confirmed that at the public consultation meeting that Durham County Council has a bespoke business team that works with companies to suitably accommodate them using these sites. However, there is no indication in the report that policy 11F of the DCP, brackets, it could not be more appropriately situated on an existing or allocated industrial estate, an existing suitable building or other land within other settlements in the vicinity, brackets, has been considered. This is disappointing as local relocation would both save current jobs and provide opportunities for the estimated 6 possible new positions per annum, as well as a result of the expansion. The claimed good relationships with local businesses could also continue, though interesting there being no letters of support for Technomark from these local businesses nor from the school. The report clearly sets out Durham County Council's obligations under the NPPF and the resulting Durham County Plan. Policy 39 of the Durham County Plan states that the development affecting areas of high landscape value will only be permitted where it conserves and, where appropriate, enhances the special qualities of landscape, unless the benefits of the development in that location clearly outweigh the harm. We believe the report has not given adequate weight in this planning balance to the adverse visual impact of the proposed development on the Middleton Teesdale Conservation Area and the North Pennines Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, to safety on our roads and to the impact on residential amenity. We respectfully request that alternative sites better suited for this expansion and improved job security be investigated. Finally, when Councillor Bell held a site visit with local residents, he gave the impression that the true impact of the development could not be appreciated without seeing the proposals on the ground. We would therefore respectfully request that the committee defer their decision in order to carry out a site visit to both the proposed site and perhaps the alternative sites available in Barnet Castle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Croft. I would remind members of the committee that it is not in our brief to examine the alternative sites. We have an application in front of us, and it's up to our job is to see whether it meets planning criteria or not. Mr. Pilkington, have you got anything you would wish to say in relation to some of the points raised by Judith Tarn? No, yes, Judith Tarn.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, first of all, I'll just reiterate your point that, yeah, this application is in front of us. We're not considering what potentially could come forward or not, or what other site may be appropriate. However, it is worthwhile pointing out that the applicant has worked with Business County Durham to explore other sites within the within the county. Excuse me. And these have not proved viable or would require a significant relocation from the current site, which has not been desirable for the business or, you know, for the wider community. Reference is made to policy 11, the rural exception site, and this stating that this policy should be applied to the application. However, this policy is only relevant where a policy would fail to satisfy the criteria of policy 6 of the local plan. Effectively, policy 6 requires that development is acceptable in principle where it is well related to an existing settlement. In this instance, we consider it is adjoining the settlement, and the suitability of the proposal should be assessed under policy 6 of the County Durham plan. Reference is made to policy 39 of the County Durham plan in relation to landscape harm, and that the levels of impact have not been fully considered. I would respectfully disagree with that, and the report articulates the level of harm, and this is weighed against the benefits of the proposal as set out in the report. I would like to quickly touch on Councillor Bell's email. who effectively distills the suitability of the site down to whether the loss of a view from a private property has a severe visual impact, and whether this outweighs any benefits of the development. I would remind members that a loss of view is not a material planning consideration. Impact on amenity is. However, in this instance, there's a separation distance of approximately 50 metres between the western elevation of the proposed development and the residential properties in Newtown. We consider this is sufficient to protect residential amenity. And I would draw members' attention to paragraph 127 of the committee report onwards, which considers this matter and also highlights that the council has a residential standards document which sets out that developments of between residential properties, a separation distance of 21 metres is considered acceptable. The eave height and the ridge height of the proposed development in this location would be representative of what could be expected from a terrace property. And under this residential amenity standards document, this separation distance with facing windows could be acceptable. And so the separation distance, more than double that is considered acceptable. In relation to deferral of the application, I would respectfully suggest that members do have the sufficient information in front of them to make a decision. The site photographs, there's plans, and obviously the presentation is just a summary of the information that has been on file, which members will have reviewed prior to this meeting.
Thank you for those points. I intend to move now straight to the committee for their comments, and then we'll move to a resolution of this also. It's over to you, committee. Councillor Jewell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Steve, for your presentation. This has been a quite interesting presentation, and it doesn't help, I think, with the break in between. So what I'd like a little information, and forgive me if that has already been provided, but in the situation we had today, maybe I've missed it. And I was wondering, Highways did talk about sort of construction traffic, but didn't talk about traffic which generated by the operational traffic. I mean, I'm not au fait with this sort of production process, and therefore are unaware of the traffic that it will generate. The other thing was that I was quite interested in the sort of operational hours of the new development, and what sort of noise does this type of process generate?
Mr. Stewart on traffic.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The figures that have been given, and I presume the applicant's still with us, have been on the basis of approximately 9 to 10 additional commercial vehicle movements per day across the working day, which is given, I think it's from 8 a.m. to 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. And that's broken down between HGVs and some smaller vehicles you would expect that were not of the size, light goods vehicles or transit sized vehicles. So that's the sort of order in terms of commercial vehicle movements given by the applicant. And the amount of additional employees has been discussed in terms of previous representations and discussion, which has been in the order, I think, between 30 and 40 over 5 years. The bulk of those have been described as taking place, or rather to be employed during the as part of the shift process, part of the production process. So in essence, the amount of additional traffic is deemed to be not material to the continued safe operation of Gas Lane. That's the essence. That's the essence of the conclusion of the Highway Authority, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Pilkington, do you want to make any comment on hours in relation to the point raised by Councillor Jewell?
Yeah, the site does operate on a 24-hour basis, and that is is proposed to continue on that basis. In support of the application, the applicant has produced a noise impact assessment, which colleagues in Environment Health have reviewed and considered that to be acceptable. And there is a condition that the development is carried out in accordance with that assessment, which includes some mitigation in terms of insulation in the construction of the warehouse building. But subject to that, Environmental Health have no objections to the scheme, and it is an established use that doesn't have a history of complaints, according to colleagues in Environmental Health.
Thanks very much for that, David, and also Stephen. That's been helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Maitland.
Thank you, Chair. And like Councillor Jewell, I might have missed something in the interruption. It's for Mr. Shaw. He said the expansion, the business has been expanding over the last few years, but he also mentioned the COVID. Would this be necessary? You know, if the COVID eases off, do they still need the expansion, you know, for the business? Is it still expanding enough for that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maitland. Are you able to answer that question, Mr. Shaw?
Yes, certainly. So the business has been growing double-digit growth for the last several years, just so we can prove a record of continuing to grow the business. Yes, we've certainly been busy because a percentage of our product has been used in the fight against COVID, but that is a percentage of 10 to 15%. Our core business has been growing for the last several years, and we expect that to continue. And even the COVID, whilst the products that are used in the fight against treating COVID patients, some of the products we make, which is still just a smaller percentage of the business, but vitally important, we still expect that, and the expectations are we'll be making COVID vaccines for many years to come. So we don't expect to be a sudden drop off. And our confidence around that, when I talked about the number of employees we have, all of our staff, all 90 plus of them are all permanent full-time employees. If we thought this was a short-term blip, then we wouldn't be employing full-time employees. So we're confident we're going to continue to grow the business. Some percentage of that, like I said, around a 10 to 15% of that product we could see growth with the helping to fight the COVID situation. But beyond that, there's still expected growth with our core business. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, it's a difficult decision, and it's always disappointing to disappoint people, either for or against. However, we couldn't defend, once again, this application if it went to appeal. It's all the right boxes. It brings employment, and it is more than double the distance away from causing an amenity hazard. So I would move approval for the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you to Councillor Richardson. Councillor Jewell.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yes, I mean, I agree very much with what Councillor Richardson has already said. I don't think we can ever please everyone in these sorts of situations, but what we have is, I think we have a majority of local people who seem to be in support of it, whilst we have a number who are against it. When we look at this, I think that it ticks all of the boxes by and large, although yes, I do feel a little sad that maybe we feel that the view is going to be affected by it. But unfortunately, you know, we can't have it both ways. And I think that the positives outweigh the negatives on this one, and I will second Councillor Richardson's proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Tinsley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it is a difficult one. I think you've got to look, there's a balance here, isn't there? But there's also a risk involved as well, and there are obvious impacts, particularly for the residents nearby. But I think you have to be aware that there is a risk here that the business may cease to exist in this location, and that would have obvious impacts as well. So it is difficult. So if there are any more comments, I will listen to those before coming to conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any members of the committee wishing to speak? RTS me as quickly as possible because I'm about to go to the vote. No, thank you very much indeed. I apologise to everybody for the disjointed nature of this consideration, but I am now going to take it to the vote. Claire, could you ask them members how they intend to view this?
Certainly, Chair, thank you. So this is a proposal which has been seconded to approve the application. Again, I'll take it in alphabetical order. Councillor Bell, are you for or against?
For the application.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
For the application.
Thank you. Councillor Jewell?
For the application.
Thank you. Councillor Maitland?
For the application.
Thank you. Councillor Quinn, are you still here or have you left?
Councillor Quinn has just left the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Tinsley?
For the application.
Thank you. And Councillor Zay?
For.
Thank you. Chair, that's unanimous.
Thank you. I do have a short comment to make. I think that the parish council got it spot on this one. You cannot be losing 92 jobs out of your village. I lived in Frostley, just over the moors for a long time, and one of the things about the nature of these Dales villages is that industry and housing does live much more cheek by the jowl than it does in some larger settlements to the east. That's just the way it is in these villages, and this is so critical that it would have been a disaster if this firm were to leave Middleton in Teesdale. However, what I will say on this is that I would appeal to the firm to listen to the comments that were made, particularly by the parish council, but also by the residents, that you are one of the people who live in this village, and it's a requirement, I think, to be a good neighbour. And I hope that when you're making this development, which has now passed successfully, that you are a good neighbour to these people and not a disaster for them. Thank you very much indeed. I now intend to move on to item 5C, which is in Longton, the lime kilns development. And I'm going to ask the case officer to speak to that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just loading up that presentation. It should have come up now. Yes, so this application seeks planning permission for the siting of 2 shepherd huts for holiday accommodation purposes and associated works. The site is located in Longton, a small grouping of dwellings and agricultural buildings located between the villages of Middleton, Teesdale and Mickleton to the southwest of the county on the B6277. I've tried to highlight the circle just to try and give you a broader view of the site. Highlight the site with a circle in the centre of the screen. Hopefully you can make that out. Here's an aerial image of the site. Application site is in red, edged in red. It's part of the residential curtilage of the applicant's dwelling, which is located directly to the northeast. The nearest residential property is located directly to the north of the site, called Longton Blacksmiths. Access to the site is proposed to be taken from the B6277 to the right. This also serves the access to the dwelling house. This is a view looking southwest across the site. You can see that the site is enclosed by a dry stone wall, which would be retained and repaired. Existing vegetation would be retained, and the shepherd huts would be sited on the grassed area towards the southern portion of the site. And the grassed area would be retained in large. This is a view looking north towards the objector's property. The shepherd's huts would be sited in the foreground, and a secondary dry stone wall is proposed to provide additional screening. This is a view from the northern boundary of the site, looking back across the application site. This is a view from the from the objector's property, looking across the site to the south. That's from the first floor window, I believe. And this is a view looking east across the site. You can see the residential use at the minute or previously of the parcel of land. There's a view from the access of the site, which would serve the development. The wall to the right of the picture would be reduced in height to approximately 1 metre, and subject to this, the Highways Authority offer no objections to the development. It's titled existing and proposed site plans, but in reality, this is a proposed plan. The bottom left corner of the plan shows where the parcel of land is and the proposed shepherd huts will be located. You can hopefully make out some dividing screens of dry stone walling to provide some privacy between the huts, and a secondary wall further to the north, just adjacent to the northern boundary, which would again provide some screening for the neighbouring residents. It's a typical image of the proposed shepherd's huts. To measure maximum of 1.2 metres to eaves and 3 metres to ridge. So the Highways Authority, Ecology, Environment Health and Visit County Durham offer no objections. Landscape advised that the development would result in intensification of the use of the site and therefore cause some harm to the area of higher landscape value through the introduction of new structures, vehicle parking, bollard lighting and modifications to the access wall. I've had 9 letters of objection received, principally in relation to the impact on the privacy and amenity of Longton Blacksmiths, the adjacent property, the visual impact of the development on noise, odour, light pollution and general disturbance to neighbours and residential and highway safety. There are also other matters which are detailed fully in the report. In conclusion, it's concluded that the proposal would result in a small but nonetheless valuable contribution to rural tourism economy and on balance would not have a significant impact on the wider landscape, character appearance of the area, residential amenity or the surrounding properties, highway safety or ecological interests that would justify refusal of the planning application. The development is therefore considered to comply with relevant policies of the County Durham Plan, including relating to development within the countryside and tourism accommodation. The proposal is therefore recommended for approval.
Thank you very much. Have any members of the committee questions of clarification they wish to ask of the officer? Please RTS if you have. I'm not getting any. I would therefore ask Ian Croft to read the submission by Councillor Bell, who is the local member.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bell and Henderson wish to make the following representation. We appreciate the changes made by the applicant during the course of this application to improve it. However, the fact remains that the shepherd's huts will impact on the amenity of the neighbour. In general, rural tourism provision is to be welcomed, but it is not the case that this development has to take place here. The applicant has land further away from the neighbour for which he previously had planning permission for a similar development. It is regrettable that this application impacts the neighbour's amenity in this way when an alternative option exists. For this reason, we would ask the committee to refuse the application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Croft. I heard there that there's other land available. I would repeat the point that we often make, that that is irrelevant. We need to just look at what we've got put in front with us, which is to place these 2 shepherd's huts on this particular plot of land. Does it meet planning criteria or does it not? The other issue was neighbours' amenity, which I intend to return to. But for the moment, I would love to hear, please, have we got Gillian Bainbridge with us?
Yes, you have.
It's so lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us. You have 5 minutes, Ms. Bainbridge, and as always, don't be thrown when Ian Croft comes in and interrupts you. Just gather yourself and carry on. We're really grateful for you for turning up. Please tell us what your objections are.
Okay, I'm speaking on behalf of all the objectors, but in particular the elderly of Longton Blacksmiths, who was very distressed by this application. The applicant has amended his plans. Can you hear me? The applicant has amended his plans and has sought to address what we objectors had raised. However, there is significant loss of amenity to Longton Blacksmiths, which is directly to the north of the site. Policy 8 of the CDP says visitors' accommodation should be allowed where appropriate to scale and character of the area. Consider, if you will, looking into a formerly green field where 2 huge black huts will sit on 25 square metres of grass surrounded by a gravel track. These huts will be 3.1 metres high. 10 feet. They'll be 10 feet wide and extend 6.7 metres, 22 feet long. They will be visually dominant and overbearing and will overwhelm the small paddock. A third of their structure will extend above the wall, even when it is raised. It will be the equivalent of looking to the back of a building some 44 feet long in a tiny paddock that is only 30 metres from a neighbour's front door. This is enormously significant in terms of visual dominance for Launcton Blacksmiths and visual amenity for the neighbourhood, as they will be seen from roads and footpaths, especially in winter months, and especially now that the colour has been changed to almost black. The impact on amenity for that resident is significant, and I believe this development will constitute towards statutory nuisance. Residents and visitors to Launcton Blacksmiths will be overlooked and able to overlook the site, dispose the proposed wall from which the huts will tower. This resident will lose his privacy that he has enjoyed for 60 years. The hut's proximity and their north and east facing windows, as well as the external bollard lighting, will impact on the dark sky area, allowing light to escape and shine directly into the master bedroom, impacting on sleep. This resident will have to put up with noise nuisance from outdoor living and drinking up throughout the day up until the supposed curfew mentioned in a noise management document. He'll have to tolerate smells and pollutants from barbecues and alfresco dining, again, statutory nuisance. His quality of life will be unacceptably impacted through visual intrusion, visual dominance, noise and loss of privacy. And I believe as part of Policy 31, it should not be permitted. Under National Policy Framework considerations, it talks about healthy communities being safe and accessible. But this development has no provision for anyone with any disabilities or limited mobility. It talks about effective use of land, but this is removing agricultural use and is changing the character of that small paddock substantially. It's an area of high value landscape in close proximity to the ANOB, and it should be preserved. Policies 38 and 39 repeatedly talk about preservation and not causing harm because of its special character. The huts with their mitigation features will have limited views for their holidaymakers. Due to their size and dark paint, they will stand out in the landscape, especially in winter months. And your landscape consultees have picked up that too. Again, grounds for refusal, I feel. There's reference in the applicant's statement referring to his 2011-12 application, but he fails to mention that he dismissed the site in question because of how it would impact on Launcton Blacksmiths and invade privacy. I ask that he considers that location and do the neighbourly thing and relocate to land where only his family would be inconvenienced. He states his market is for professional couples, but where is the surety that this will be maintained? And where will their behaviour be any different to what he refers to as the birthday party market? Having purchased huts, he'll expect 100% occupancy. He refers to lowering the huts, but he's comparing that to his previous application. The huts have always been 3 metres by 3 metres by 7. His application was suitably vague and some items have only come to light in the planning officer's report. The failure to mention heating methods, shrubs, the height of low walls, the material to be used, and submitting an old design and access statement from 2011 is not appropriate. The planning issues listed by the officer are numerous and not insubstantial, particularly points 47 and 68. I urge you, the planning committee members, to use the planning framework and the County Durham plan to recommend refusal, or at the very least ask the applicant to use his other land. And if you accept his...
Time has elapsed, Chair.
Thank you.
Talking to mute again. Thank you so much. That was very, very helpful. Stephen, I'm going to take the applicant now, so to allow him to come straight in and speak, and then if you don't mind, please, sir, I'll ask you for comments when we've heard them. So, Mr. Liam Patrick. Scott Patrick.
Hello.
Hello there.
Can you see me?
Yes, I can see you. Are you Scott or Liam?
Well, I'm Liam and Scott. It's two. I've got two names, but yeah, it's Liam Scott Patrick.
Well, you're very, very welcome, sir, whatever your name. And you have 5 minutes to pitch your case, sir, and you'll be interrupted, remember, just ride it. And we're very interested to hear what you have to say, sir, too. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, thank you for this opportunity. And I just wanted to not reiterate some points that I made on my statement, but just point out a few things that I thought might be useful. Really, I want to speak and explain the reasons why I think this small development would work, why we want to do it, importantly, why we've chosen the site, and what we're trying to achieve. I've worked within the hospitality industry, or certainly associated industries that look after hospitality for the past 30 years, always at the top end of the market. Firstly with Corney and Barrow in the wine business, and now with Launton Coffee, where we have a great reputation, supply many Michelin star restaurants with coffee that's roasted here in Teesdale. So what I'm trying to do when I explain that is really, I hope, demonstrate that I've always operated at a certain level in the market, and this is exactly what I'm trying to do with the proposed development. So Visit County Durham is actively looking for high quality accommodation. That's what we've tried to achieve here. The budget for this particular project will be close to £80,000, which in itself would be somewhere close to buying a small cottage. But what I've tried to do is balance the need for high quality accommodation, also with avoiding taking small cottages away from local residents, which I think the holiday let market is doing. So I tried to square that circle of providing good quality, super quality accommodation with high spending individuals, but avoid taking away the housing stock for local people. Okay, so then positioning, why we are suggesting the positioning. Firstly, well, there's two reasons. The first reason was when we first looked at the glamping sector in 2012, we were looking at camping pods. Now, John Locken, who at the time was the senior architect, landscape architect, suggested that we replace these pods in where we've applied for this time. At the time, I had two children that were 12 and 8. They've since grown up, and we used the lawn as a lawn. Now it's unused land, and we're wanting to use that land effectively. So we started off with a position that we were suggested by a professional. The second really is the change of what people expect from holiday accommodation now. Back in 2012, the glamping was very much about camping, glamorous camping, I suppose, but it was camping without a tent, very much sleeping bag situation and an outside toilet. Things have moved on, and with a view to the County Durham plan of trying to get more high quality accommodation, this wouldn't work in terms of the actual products, the pods themselves, and also the location, which was tucked behind a wall. So what we've tried to do with the help of planners is to come up with a solution which gives more space. It provides accommodation, including washing accommodation within the huts. So we've tried to do that, but we've also tried to take care of everyone's privacy. So we've pushed them further south, furthest away we can from our neighbours. We've moved lots of the points originally put in the application, so the car parking is moved. We've made lots of compromises, and we've also made sure that they're facing south. Any of the windows are small windows that face north. One's a bathroom and one's a kitchenette area. These are not places where people are going to be living. So we've tried to look south. We've tried to move them further away from the neighbour. So obviously, I'm not a planner, but what we've
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. I'm not a planner, but what we started with was a position that we were advised a few years ago by the senior architect, the landscape architect, and then with really close work with the planners, we've tried to address any issues that would create conflicts with the national planning or the County Durham plan. That's included lots of ways of creating privacy. So I've taken as many steps as I can. I live on site and I've provided details of a noise management plan. should there be any unexpected issues arising, but this is for the professional couples market. Thank you for your time. I hope you agree with the planning officer's assessments, and that's all I've got to say, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick, and that was very, very helpful indeed. Stephen, would you like to comment about those submissions as a whole, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, in many respects, it's a similar sort of application to the previous application, where there's an undeveloped parcel of land, a proposal's coming in to change the nature of that, and undoubtedly that will have an impact on residents. But really, the test is whether that impact is at an unacceptable level to warrant refusal of the application and substantiate the appeal. In this instance, we consider it's not. You know, we've had consultation with colleagues in environmental health who assessed the application in terms of residential amenity and in relation to statutory nuisance, and raised no objection to the application, subject to an adherence to a noise management plan. A condition is attached to, or recommended to be attached to any approval, to refine that and to ensure that that is adhered to. In terms of the landscape impact, we feel that the development would be seen in the context of existing developments in the area, or the backdrop of an existing development. As the objector has pointed out, planning permission was granted a few years back to a site further to the east, which would be more visually prominent than the proposal. The site is well contained within the garden wall, which are highlighted on those photographs. The wall would be refurbished, some additional planting proposed, and existing planting retained. There's a condition to control details of external lighting to make sure that they're set on motion sensors and to ensure the luminance is not significant. And just to reiterate that, you know, this is residential amenity space. It's not agricultural land. The applicant could use this for, you know, residential amenity purposes and the associated impacts with that. So ultimately, we feel that the level of impacts of the application are not sufficient to warrant its refusal and to substantiate an appeal.
Thank you very much. Have any members of the committee got any questions that they would like to ask of anybody? Councillor Jewell.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair, and thank you, Stephen, for your presentation. Could I just ask? I noticed that the objector talked about the visual impact of the huts, not necessarily the wider visual impact, but how these huts would look. Can you give me more information on that? And secondly, what I would like to know is how far are the huts from the applicant's premises? Thank you.
You're on mute, Mr. Pilkington.
Sorry, schoolboy error. I'm just going to share the presentation again and to show the elevations of the huts. Yeah, hopefully I'll come up in a second. I just skip through to the right slide. Yeah, so that's the appearance of the huts there. Sort of timber, you know, dark stained. You know, we feel that they're, you know, visually they're acceptable in terms of their appearance. In terms of separation distances, so the objector's property is approximately 30 meters away. So, you know, referring back to this residential standards guidance, sets out that you can have a 21-meter separation distance between windows of habitable rooms. Given the relative sort of single story of these, obviously we're in well excess of that. And relating back to the applicant's property, I would say to their core property is probably about 40 meters away. However, there are areas of amenity space which are closer than that. So yeah, they are in earshot of the development. They're built to have a watching view over it, and obviously would be able to effectively manage. They don't live remotely away from the site, which, you know, other other sort of tourism accommodation situations have arisen. So there would be an on-site management presence there.
Thanks very much, Steve.
Councillor Liz Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Councillor Jewell has asked one of my questions, but I was going to ask, will there be screening planting in between the objector's property and the shepherd's huts? What I would add at this point, though I don't know whether we've come to that bit yet, is that post-COVID, we're going to have to find some way of attracting tourism back into the area, because our town and village centres are going to need all the help they can get. So I can't see any reason not to allow this, actually. But I shall leave that to a later point.
I knew I shouldn't have took that presentation down, so I'm going to put it back up again and load it up. And I'll show you the site layout plan again there.
Sorry, Steve.
That's all right. Okay, so the bottom left of the screen there, you can hopefully see the position of the two huts. There's a wall in a T-shaped arrangement, which I believe is proposed to be about 1.2 meters tall. There's a secondary wall to the north of that, extending from what they call the roastery building across the port northern boundary of the site. And the applicant's proposing to erect a 1.8 meter stone wall to provide additional screening. So no vegetation is proposed. However, I'll just get a view. So there is, however, there is vegetation within the objector's boundary, which does provide a degree of filtering. If members so wished, I'm sure we could explore a condition to provide additional planting. I don't foresee that being a major issue, but I don't feel it's necessary. And yeah, just to reiterate, just to sort of enforce your point about tourism accommodation, the need for that, you know, there is support for this proposal from Visit County Durham, and the benefits of you know, tourism in the rural area is recognised.
Thank you, Steve. Right, committee, over to you for comments and a motion, and let's decide what we think about this. Councillor Jewell.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a situation where there's going to be one person goes away happy and one person goes away unhappy, which is often the case in the planning process. I can't see any reason not to go along with the recommendations of the planners here. I can't see any valid planning considerations which sort of would go against that. And I think that what we have is we have mitigating circumstances which actually try to address the concerns of the objectors. So I would propose that we go along with the approval along the approval route provided by our planners. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. It's a shame we can't get any easy decisions, isn't it? I'd just like to second Councillor Jewell's proposal. I know I've got in before Councillor Richardson, who was probably going to do the same thing. But I think, as I said, post-COVID, our tourism industry is going to need all the help it can get, and this will go something towards it. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Brown needn't worry, because I wasn't going to do that. Among my other sins, I consider myself a countryman. This is in an area of Teesdale, to the Barncastle West, not to the east, which I represent. Now, if this had come forward in a housing development or some other area like that, I wouldn't be surprised. But this is the countryside where friends and neighbours really care for each other's opinions. And this is placed right in front of the objectors, and it's as such, it blocks their amenity. I've only seen on the television one of these shepherd's huts, and if you've ever watched the Yorkshire Shepherdess, they have one which is actually in North Yorkshire, but as the crow flies from High Force, it'll probably only be 2 miles to the south. But it is in a lane in a private area where they don't affect anybody, surrounded by beautiful countryside, but also secluded. So this, in effect, is the total opposite to that. So I know a little bit about it from the past. My colleagues, all right, maybe have influenced me because they aren't really happy about it, particularly when the original application was not affecting anybody. So I think I know the way this is going to go, but personally, I'm going to have to go for refusal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the committee who wish to speak? I'm going to speak. The chair always has to be very, very careful of speaking because it can be seen as a steer. That is absolutely not the case. I'm just going to share my opinion as a committee member. I think that this is an incredibly difficult decision. There's not a single member of the committee who would not be horrified if they lived out in the countryside in what they believe to be a quiet and rural location, and suddenly in the garden next to them there were 2 holiday chalets planted with all the things that Mers Bainbridge stated, with people who were there to have a good time. They're not there to behave like mice, and they're there on holiday. And the impact, the perceived impact on that person's residential amenity will be absolutely huge. And there's not one of us in this committee who doesn't absolutely sympathise with that point of view. On the other hand, you have the right of an individual to do what they make their property as commercially viable as possible. This is a business, and sort of, so he has the right to propose these things. The second thing is we've just approved increasing the size of a factory right next to some houses, and there's an issue of the perceived change in residential amenity will be huge to this person. But as the officer has pointed out, in absolute terms of residential amenity, is it or is it not unacceptable? And of course, third, we've got what Councillor Brown has pointed out as the issue with tourism and the support of Visit County Durham for this. So it's an impossible decision for people to make, and unless anybody wants to speak, what I'm going to do is, and with the permission of the legal officer, who's going to tell me whether I've overstepped any bounds or not, I will just put it to the vote. People can make their own decision for or against. And then what I'm going to suggest is that that will be either refusal, or we don't need to have separate proposals for refusal and acceptance. It'll just be a clear vote for or against. Claire, is anything do you need to correct anything I've said?
Chair, so as far as I can see, we've got a proposal from Councillor Jewell, seconded by Councillor Brown, in favour of granting permission.
Yeah.
Are you indicating that?
I'm just saying that we just put that to the. We're saying that we put that to the members and see how the vote goes.
Certainly.
Is that okay?
Certainly. Do you wish me to proceed now?
I would wish you to proceed, please. Thank you.
Councillor Bell, are you in favour or against granting planning permission?
For the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Jewell?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Maitland?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Tinsley? Councillor Tinsley? Councillor Tinsley, I can't hear you. I'll move on. Councillor Zare?
4.
Thank you, Chair. Make that 5-1, but Councillor Tinsley, are you available?
It wouldn't have made any difference to the vote either way. For the record, Claire, I'm going to abstain on this one. I think that this is a very distressing decision. I absolutely accept the recommendation from the committee that we accept it. Thank you very much for to those people who've taken part. And as Councillor Jewell said, one of the sad things we have to do is we have to disappoint some people. We're going to move to our last application, which is sorry, please forgive me, is the site of former St Peter's School on Main Road, Gainford. And I'm going to ask the officer to explain everything to us, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for the erection of 39 dwellings, associated access and landscaping at the site of the former St Peter's School Main Road in Gainford. The application site is edged in red, located to the west of Gainford, somewhat separated from the settlement, but located within the Gainford Conservation Area. An aerial image of the site. The wider site is predominantly greenfield. However, the site includes part of the former St Peter's School site to the northeastern portion of the site. This is a site photograph of the view of the fire damaged building from the A67. This is the only principal remaining building of the former school on the site. The previous proposal of a comprehensive development to included the conversion of this building. This is now omitted from the scheme. These are site photos from the rear of the building over existing hard standings areas and additional building that is within the application site. This area of the application site is largely overgrown, unsightly, and the building is in poor condition. There's a view southward over landscaped areas and undeveloped parts of the site. Existing and proposed site plans. You can see on the right that the development excludes the St Peter's building and only part front and the frontage onto the A67. It's a more detailed view of the proposed layout and landscaping. Dwelling served off a number of cul-de-sacs, with the access now proposed to the east of the St Peter's School building. Some typical house types proposed. Just for reference, this was the approved scheme. You can see that the building to the north of this plan was included in the scheme, and the access was located to the west of this building. So in terms of consultation responses, Design and Conservation advised that the development would result in a less substantial harm to the conservation area due to the detached location in the countryside and the omission of the former school building. Design issues identified with the treatment of corner turner units and the prominent gables are highlighted, and the properties back onto the open space. Landscape raised concerns about the practicality of managing and maintaining such a large area of public open space and properties backing onto these areas. The proposals would involve some mature trees on the site. Got no objections from highways, environment agency, archaeology, education, environmental health, and drainage and ecology subject to conditions. Gainford Parish Council had no comments received. The Council CPRE objected to the application given the omission of the school buildings and detached location of the site. And we've had 6 letters of objections received, primarily in relation to the lack of cohesion given the omission of the school building. So in summary, the proposal would conflict with policy 6 of the County Durham Plan as not well related to the settlement. Similarly, the proposal is not one of the accepted forms of development in the countryside. Given the omission of the former school building and associated land, any benefits previously attributed to the redevelopment of the site do not weigh in favour of the proposals, and the presumption against development should be not overridden. The proposals would result in impacts to the character of the rural landscape, area of high landscape value, and less substantial harm to the conservation area. The scheme would provide limited benefits in terms of provision of affordable housing, economic benefits during construction. However, these would not outweigh the identified harm. The development does not achieve very high quality design when assessed against BFL 12 standards. There are no significant reasons that outweigh the standard of design, and therefore the proposal is conflict with policy 29 and part 12 of the NPPF. The scheme does not provide 10% of the units to meet the needs for older people or multi-generational families. And overall, the development would conflict with the County Durham Plan, given the absence of securing the benefits of the retention of the redevelopment of the key buildings on site. There are no material considerations which are considered capable of outweighing this conflict, and therefore the application is recommended for refusal.
Thank you. Before I move to the agent, are there any members who wish to ask clarifying questions on the, I've forgotten the word, so what we've just heard? I'm not getting any. If you take down that presentation, and I'll ask Steve Longstaff, who is the agent for ELG Planning, from ELG Planning, to make that. You've got 5 minutes, Mr. Longstaff. Hello again.
Yeah, me back again.
Very exciting. Well, you're sort of you're into the swing of things now. We'll let you give your presentation.
Thanks, Joe. I won't reintroduce myself because obviously we're from earlier on. As you'll be aware, planning permission was granted in 2019 for the comprehensive redevelopment of this site, including the former school buildings. The site is therefore a housing commitment, and delivery from it is included within the council's housing land supply. Since the approval, Keval Homes have worked very hard to try and agree a deal with the other landowner that would allow the site to be developed on a comprehensive basis. However, despite their best endeavours, these discussions have not borne fruit. Keval's solution to this dilemma has therefore been to seek a standalone planning permission for their part of the site, in the hope that bringing their site forward would encourage the other landowner either back to the negotiating table to agree a comprehensive approach, or give them the necessary confidence to bring forward the development of their part of the site, which already has a standalone planning permission. Both schemes can work independently and would be complementary. This approach has culminated in the submission of the current planning application by Keval for housing development on the part of the site that they control. The current scheme will provide the same benefits to the local community that the original scheme would have delivered, including delivery of high quality, well-designed new dwellings within walking distance of local services and facilities on a predominantly previously developed site, as well as a policy compliant number of affordable housing units, offering first-time buyers and those on low incomes increased opportunities to access new housing. The scheme will also provide an improved area of open space to the south of the site for all local residents to enjoy. Whilst this is not the ideal solution, we hope members can appreciate the difficult position that the applicant is in and the efforts of Keval in attempting to be proactive and bring the site forward, notwithstanding problems outside of their control. Keval believe that a start has to be made somewhere, and that granting planning permission for their current application provides the best opportunity available to resolve the problems at St Peter's. We are therefore disappointed that officers have recommended refusal of the application, which is in essence the same as what has already been approved. In terms of the suggested reasons for refusal themselves, the applicant has sought throughout the process to deal with the issues raised, and we do not consider the matters raised warrant refusal of the application. I will quickly run through them. Reason for refusal 1, the proposals do make effective use of previously developed land, and as acknowledged in the committee report, which extends to around 65% of the site, which acknowledged as being brownfield. Reason for refusal 2, the proposals follow the same design principles and the layout is very similar to that which has already been approved. Reason 3, the proposed houses mentioned in the reasons for refusal don't look onto the St Peter's building, and as shown on the submitted plans, existing vegetation and new boundary fencing is proposed to screen the development from this area. Reason for refusal 4, it should be noted that these requirements were not required when the application was submitted. However, the proposed house types can readily meet the M42 requirements, and this could adequately be controlled by condition. Moreover, the proposed housing mix provides a range of house types, including smaller dwellings, which would be suitable for those looking to downsize, and also larger dwellings, which would be suitable for multi-generational families. In our view, the requirements of Policy 15 can therefore be met. As such, we do not consider that there to be any reasonable basis for the officer's recommendation, and would respectfully request that members support the application and grant planning approval. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Longstaff. Have any members of the committee got questions for Mr. Longstaff before I come to Mr. Pilkington? No, I'm not getting any, Mr. Longstaff. Thank you very much for your. You clearly browbeat them into submission. Mr. Pilkington, have you got any comments that you wish to make?
Yeah, I mean, just quickly. I mean, look, this is effectively a similar proposal that was originally approved, but without the conversion of the principal buildings on site. Significant weight was given in the approval of that application to the retention and conversion of these buildings, and we feel that the mission of that is critical to this application. And without the cross benefit of market housing, there's not really a realistic prospect of securing the redevelopment of that principal building, and that in itself is not an effective use of land. And I would point out that in terms of design, we are in a different planning context now. The County Durham plan has been adopted. Design has moved up the planning agenda. We robustly assess the design. We don't feel that it is up to the standard that is required, notwithstanding the fundamental issue of the omission of the conversion of the original building.
Thank you very much indeed for those comments. I'll come to the committee now. Any questions or comments that you would like to make? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is in my ward, and for many years it's been an ongoing millstone round our necks, I suppose. I don't know how many of you councillors remember Joe Fergus, who was my first colleague in Barnett Castle East, and who stretched even further back to when St Peter's was a school and her husband was headmaster. But we've tried over the years to get things moving. We thought we had, but myself and my partner, James Rowlandson, who couldn't get to speak today, although I do believe he's listening in, can do nothing but agree with the officer's recommendation. I've spoken to a couple of the, oh, sorry, my screen went blank. I've spoken to a couple of the parish council members, and everybody that I've spoken to is in agreement that this doesn't meet the criteria. It's not what we want, and as desperate as we are to have something done with the St Peter's site, with a heavy heart, I'll have to recommend the officer's proposal of refusal. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Don't be sorry at all, Councillor Richardson. Have we any other comments from other members of the committee? Councillor Jewell?
Yeah, this one was a strange one for me, because I can see sort of the pros and cons of it, although I am a little disappointed. I mean, I felt that with the redevelopment of the old school, it was very much a goer, but obviously we haven't been able to achieve this. I need to take on board the local members' views on this this particular one. And whilst I always take local members' views into consideration, I sometimes feel that some local members don't have a valid sort of view on it. But I think in this case, George, your view is very, very important. And I think, I take on board exactly what you're saying. And I think that without sort of the further development, this millstone, which has been with you for years, will remain with you for many years to come. And I think this is the only way, by going along with the planners on this one, with their valid refusal reasons, to try and get something done on that site which is positive. So I will second Councillor Richardson's proposal on this occasion.
Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. I mean, I'm in agreement with the other two members. I mean, granting the planning application the last time, a lot of it was to do with redevelopment that old building and that, and to do it now without redeveloping that old building, I think it's defeating the object, and the aim of the thing. Obviously the local members have the views. I mean, I used to pass that every day. I had a caravan up there, so every weekend I passed it. And, over the years you could see it deteriorating, and it can only get worse. And to build new housing round about it, to me, it's a non-go. So I'm sorry, I must agree with the officer's recommendation and the other members who have spoken before us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other members who wish to speak? I'm not getting anybody. Therefore, we have a proposal and a proposer and a seconder that we refuse on the grounds advanced by the officer. Claire, can you take the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Bell, are you for or against, please?
Against.
You wish for the permission?
Sorry, should I say I'm for the recommendation?
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Councillor Brown?
For the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Jewell?
For the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Maitland?
For the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson?
For the recommendation.
Thank you. And Councillor Tinsley?
For the recommendation.
Thank you. Chair, that's unanimous.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll make a short comment. I read in paragraph 6 in the applicant statement, Kebble appreciate that in an ideal world, it would be preferable for the whole site to be brought forward. I'm sorry, but that is incorrect. In the real world, it is necessary for the whole site to be brought forward. The original application, one of them was explicitly an enabling development where we accept something which we would not normally accept in order to achieve a better good, and that was the development of these this building. There's still a year left on the original application, and I would appeal to Kebble and their agent to pull this one out of the fire and do what we gave you permission to do in the first place. Thank you very much indeed. That application is rejected, and that I think is the end of the meeting. I have no other items for consideration. It remains just for me to first of all tell Steve Pilkington that his background of Bolleyhope, that is the most beautiful place on God's earth. I recommend it. If you haven't been there, go and just sit and have a cup of coffee and watch the water, the river wander by, sort of looking out over a very important former lead mining area. To the members, thank you for your professionalism, not just through this meeting, but through all our meetings over the last year. This, of course, is the last time we'll be meeting, and it's for some of us, it may well be the last time we ever see each other again in a formal council setting. So thank you very much. If you're standing for election, all the very best for your election campaign. If you're not, thank you for your service to Durham County Council, and thank you to the officers who put up with me for the last year. You are deeply appreciated as well. Thank you very much, everybody. Unless somebody's going to say you've missed something really important, I intend to close the meeting.